I'm going to move this over then.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Hello, Lance.
How's the world treating y'all today?
All right, can you start?
We're gonna start. So anyway, want to say hi. If you don't know, I'm Lance Hanson, and you're not. And so and this is Kelsey Russell, and she has agreed to help today. Do some things and talk and answer some questions and stuff. But first, I'm going to start out by having a little bit of discussion, then we'll wrap her back up and gain all her knowledge. So, okay. So, who in here has written an offer like in the last month? We're doing pretty good then. All right. And so I should consider this group probably buyer's agents as well as some listing agents. Does that sound about right? Okay. How many of you in the last, let's say since the first of the year, maybe even in the last year, have had the pleasure of writing one offer with a buyer and got it accepted and sold the house? We got a few. That's pretty good. I'm glad to see that. How many of you have had buyers where you have 4, 5, or 6 offers before you get to sell a house? Okay, we got a few of those too. So here's the deal. After you wrote that 5th or 6th offer and got it accepted, did the seller and / seller's agent offer to pay you more for your effort? No? Because I thought we were paid for what we do. That not the case? I think we're paid on one thing only. We're paid on our successes, correct? Okay, so I want to up the ante of your success. And the way we do that is we're talking about a market that is changing very slowly. It's very slow. But if you go back and you look at the graphs and the charts and everything that NAR puts out, his commission levels are just a tick at a time going down. Just a little bit at a time, they're going down. Are you less knowledgeable? Are you less able to do your job correctly? I mean, I'm thinking that the majority of people here would agree that right now, you have to be the best buyer's agent that you've ever had to be in your career. Some of you have been around for a while, is that true? Or do you have to be a better agent, buyer's agent now than what you had to be in 2016, 17? I think so. But you know what? Nobody upped the ante. Because we work harder, we do more stuff, we write more offers, we have to learn different negotiating skills, different ways of putting an offer together and presenting it. We have to understand more about the financing and what it takes to be, quote, pre-qualified and, quote, pre-approved, and what level you're actually at when you become approved. We have to understand how to negotiate with somebody who they have a house to sell, but they're scared to death because if they sell that house, they got nowhere to go. So how do you work through the details and get that person so that they're finding the house they want and selling the house that they have and make it all come together? So our world, especially in the last 2 years, has gotten terribly complicated. It just has. We have to be better at what we do as buyer's agents. We actually have to be better as listing agents as well, because of the multiple offers and how do you identify each different level. So a lot of people grew up on the idea in this business that, hey, whoever's willing to pay more. See, but that's not the case, because just because you can pay more doesn't mean the property is going to appraise properly. And if you're a good listing agent, you understand that. And then there's a whole set of guidelines that go along with that. So my question is that as knowledge base and requirements to be a really good buyer's agent rise, how many of you are going to be okay with somebody else telling you your value as a buyer's agent? Because right now, that's what we do. We give off our income. We give off the decisions of what we're worth to every listing agent out there. Now, we have for a long time, for years and years in this business, have had this kind of, for lack of a better word, gentleman's agreement, you know, gentle ladies agreement now is more prevalent. But we've had this where it's like, well, me as a listing agent, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to treat you well, and then you're going to treat me well, and everybody's going to live happily ever after. Has anybody noticed that there is a little glitch in that system where, because they're talking with the seller, and the seller's like, wait a minute, I see in realtors' advertisements that they sold the house in 2 hours. Why should I pay a buyer's agent 3%? They're going to come bring their buyer anyway. Why don't we just pay them 2%? I mean, that's fair. I mean, my house is a $400,000 house, for crying out loud. 2%. That's pretty good money. They should be able to work for that amount of money, you know, because that's our world right now. I'm telling you that the direction that the train is headed is not going to change. It's going that way. And the way the government with the Department of Justice, the way they are viewing us is we're damn sure not worth what we get paid. They publish all the time about this billions of dollars of commission that's going to be paid to this group of unworthy agents, that they don't do anything to throw a signature on a piece of paper and wait for their check. And I'm serious. I'm not like taking that to a level that it's not at. That literally is the feeling of the government and those agents, or those people, you know, our governmental agencies. That is how they view us. And we have for so many years worked in the buyer's agent pool and had the seller paying us that they perceive no value whatsoever because the buyer does not pay us. How could we be worth much? The buyer doesn't even pay us. In fact, up until a year or two ago, we were doing a lot of advertising. It was like, hey, my services are free. And they're thinking, and exactly what they're worth. Okay? That's the mindset. We've had our hand in that. Trust me. As agents, we've had our hand in that. We advertise that our worth is virtually nil because the buyer wants the property. It's limited inventory. Finds a house. We throw an offer together. Boom, done. It's over at that point because we don't express to people all of the things we have to do to get a buyer ready. They don't just come in the office, sit down, we looked at the screen. They're like, yeah, let's go look at those two. One of those should work. And you go out and look at it and they're like, yeah, we think that one. That's not our world, is it? And we work hard. So here's my thing. I think that it's high time we start telling people that we're worth it. And I'm not telling all these other people out here. I'm saying buyers should understand what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. Because they don't know. You know, the largest buying pool right now is millennials. You know that 92% of millennials want an agent and they're professional. They want them to help them. And we're asking them to pay us and they got no clue what we do. They just know they should have a professional. But listen, right now, we were talking about this a little yesterday. Right now, you're a listing agent. You know, you're like, hey, I'm gonna stick with the team. This is my profession. I'm gonna take care of them. And so you do a full split 3 and 3, 6%, right? You're like, I'm giving 3. Do you have any recourse whatsoever on that 3% if you get the shittiest agent available? If you get the person that comes, sort of kind of gets the paperwork filled out, throws it on your desk, waits for the phone call, and then expects you as the listing agent to take care of everything else. I mean, they're ridiculous. Every one of us in here knows one. I guarantee you, every person in this room knows that agent. And they're not all the same, okay? We know them. We're like, oh. You know, it's like, well, shit, they got the best offer, you know, that kind of stuff. Do they really? You know, do they really have the best offer? So what I'm saying is that sellers probably should have the ability to control that and say, listen, you know, I'll pay you based on your value to the transaction. That would be an interesting thing. And the problem is we can't go there. There's no way of knowing ahead of time when you make a promise of compensation in writing on the MLS. There's no way to go back and say, well, yeah, but not for you. Okay, because that's against all the rules and we go to the commission and all that kind of stuff. So my proposal is this: why don't we start understanding our value? Why don't we understand exactly what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, and then communicate that information to a buyer and say, for all of those services, my experience, my expertise, all the promises that I make to you, why don't you just agree to pay me? And then from that point on, it's always about us figuring out how to get that money out of the transaction. If it's a 3% right up in the get-go, and you're like, got it, no problem. But if it's 2, it is then your duty to make sure that that buyer knows that it's 2, because they may have an obligation to pay the difference. Okay? The Department of Justice, even though this information has been pulled and they don't agree to it anymore, one of the things they wanted was the inability of us as agents to be able to research in mass what buyers' commissions were. They wanted to take away the ability to go in and go, buyer's commissions 0 to 3%, 0 to 2.5%. Has anybody done that? It's pretty interesting if you go in there and start doing that, because you're like, oh crap, there's quite a bit of under 3s out there, and it's growing. It's growing. There's a builder in Ames that automatically pays 2.5 to buyer's agent every transaction. The way it is, you know. So I think that the whole thing should be, let's find out what we're worth. I mean, do you know, seriously, I'm looking at every one of you here. Do you actually know what you're worth? Can you tell me, or a buyer, can you say, this is what I am worth this because of these things? I do my job like this. That's why you should pay me.
No, it's healthy can, and that's why I'm here.
Exactly. So that's the idea. Is that, and you may not have it right now. I'll be honest with you. You may be like, oh shit. Yes, you know. But you better start writing it down. What do you do? How do you do it? And why do you do it? Because all of those things, especially the why, should be to a huge benefit of the buyer that you've agreed to work with. Because you've done agency, right? Agency says these are things I'm going to do because in the agreement, that's what I have to do. I mean, that's what it says. But if you start doing exclusive buyers rep, you have changed the promise. You changed the promise. Now you say, see these things? I promise to do those things. I guarantee that I'm going to do those things. If in fact I don't do those things, you have the ability to fire me. Just like they do in listings. We can all be fired from listing. And if you're screwing up, I will not stand behind you on a listing. Like, it's just the way it is. I'm sorry. It's the same thing for a buyer's agent. You have responsibilities to take care of, and we kind of brush through them a little bit, you know, fiduciary responsibilities and blah, 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 in an agency agreement, which I put in here for comparison. But when we do exclusive, it is an absolute guarantee and promise of your service. So listen, mindset. Exclusive buyer's agency is not there to protect the agent. It's there to protect the buyer. Put that in your head. It is there to protect the buyer. You have a set of guidelines you guarantee to do. It's a contract just like any other. We relate more to a listing contract, and it's the exact same things. A promised set of guidelines that we're going to perform so that they pay us for our services, and we live up to the promise and the guarantee that comes of it. So my point here today is, listen, this is a direction. This is something that if you want your business to continue and get paid what you're worth, this is a direction you have to go. This is a form that needs filled out. This has to happen. Otherwise, you are just anything that's out there. And in this market right now, if somebody says they like, well, we saw this house, we really love it. Is the first thing you do to go look at commission? Nope, it isn't, because you're better than that. You're better agents than that. You look at the house, where's it at? How's it priced? What's going on with it? Somewhere after the fact, you go, oh shit, it's 2%. And then you're going to live with it. You can't change the level of service because you're already committed. You know, it's like, well, they're not paying my full 3, so I'm not going to do this, this, and this for you. It's not possible. We can't do that. It's not part of the program. Okay? So I know that there's a whole bunch of questions, and most of them have to do with how in the world do you implement this? How do you make this work in your buyer presentations? And because of that, I got one of our resident experts. So Kelsey Russell is going to come up, and between us, hopefully mostly you, we're going to answer questions about the presentation, how it works, questions that might get asked. And so she's going to give you her overall view of how that all works, maybe some scenarios of how you answer some questions. So welcome, Kelsey.
Absolutely. Yeah, so happy to take any questions at the end, but I've had quite a few people ask me about this and just like, why did you implement it? How do you implement it? And for me, it really starts with the consultation. Like all of our buyers, there's an initial consultation. You know, someone calls you and they maybe have a house they want to see. They say, hey, you know, I love this property. And for me, it really does depend on when that consultation happens based on how that lead came through. You know, if it's a completely random listing call and I want to, you know, get that lead, I might go to the house. I would normally go to the house, meet the person, build some rapport, figure out what their questions are. But I don't show them more than one house without this being signed off. So that's where, you know, you have that opportunity to meet with them. But I would say that's 20% of my business. 80% of my business is either past repeat clients or referrals, where this is like very easy to implement in my mind. So I started doing it about 3 years ago. I've been in the business for 5.5 years. So, you know, kind of did the like run around with buyers and just hope it works out. And got burned once by that. And I only showed him like 10 houses, but I thought about the people that I showed like 50, because everyone's had that person where they look for 2 years on and off. And I was like, I don't want to not get paid for what I do. So even if I lose a client over, giving them an agency agreement, I've had that happen, I think 3 times in the 3 years I've been using it, and have sold over 200 houses. So it's not often, but I don't want that client. If I can explain my value, I can explain what I do and can explain why we should get paid for what we do. A lot of the times it'll be someone that says, well, I've seen 3 houses with this realtor, and I also talked to this realtor, and I also called the listing agent. And that's where I'm like, this is what we do. This is how we serve you, really build out the value. And if they're not going to sign it, then I don't want to show them a house because I'm not going to get paid on it, 90% of the time in that situation. So yeah, for me, that initial consultation, someone normally calls asking about, I want to see this house, or my friend, referred me to you, or someone sends me a referral. So it starts with either in the office is preferred, but a lot of people these days like to do Zoom, and it's a lot more approachable. So I do probably 80% of them over video, and also work with a good amount of out-of-state people. So that's good as well. But we have a buyer packet built out. It's probably 25, 30 pages of, this is what the process looks like. This is how we protect your investment. This is what we do for you during the process. And honestly, it's a lot of the things that Lance talked about as far as, we work nights and weekends. We, are going to be here for you. We're prospecting listings that maybe aren't on the market. We want to know your criteria so we can talk to other agents, find pocket listings. Sometimes we're looking at for sale by owners. We're looking at expired listings. And I really look at it as a way to show them we're looking at everything possible to get you the best house. And at the end of the day, a lot of people look at commission as, it's free, you don't have to pay it. But to me, it's the commission is, whatever percent that we charge, and I go over that. And the reason you pay that is because of all these services that we provide. A lot of the times it is covered by the seller, but if it's not, it'll have to be paid on your settlement statement. This is what that looks like. I do let them know sometimes they can roll it into their loan, sometimes not. So we go through all those scenarios. I go through how to deal with for sale by owners very bluntly in the initial conversation. I go through next gen and how they operate and how they won't let me into the house. So, ask to take good video, and I'll support you as best I can. But I also let them know kind of the percentage of listings that are normally next gen versus the rest of the market. I let them know that, in over 200 houses sold, I've only sold 1 next gen listing. So it's this idea of, I don't want to get in the way of you in a house ever, and I won't, but advising them on why something that's not, listed with a cooperating broker or not listed on the market might not be the best house for them, and why someone's not wanting to work with a professional, and what that shows about, potentially how they value their house or how they take care of it. So that's the gist of the overall presentation. Is we go through this presentation, we build a ton of value, and then I feel them out. Everything we do in this business is feeling out a seller, whether every listing or feeling out a client. If I go to a listing appointment, I always have docs ready, and 60% of the time they sign it right there the first time I meet them. 40% of the time I'm like, oh, this is probably going to be off-putting to them. So we're going to, build some more value, send comps. We're going to send them electronically, or we're going to come back later and get them. So it's the same way with a buyer. If I'd say 80% of the time, it's a slam dunk. They sign it within 24 hours, whether that is at the table or I'm going to just send this over to you. And I offer to send the buyer packet if they want it. And that's really helpful because it's here's all this value I provided to you. Here's all the stuff we're going to do. And also here's the contract you need to sign. And then timeline wise for me, I just tell them it's our policy, meaning our team's policy, that this is signed off before we see any houses. So they don't get set up on a search until they sign it. They don't get to see houses until they sign it, because that's my rule for myself, because it is really awkward if you show someone a house and then you say, oh, well, now we need this thing signed off. And they're like, why? So that's the overall gist.
First scenario you pointed out, let's say you get an online lead, a sign call, and you're going and showing them a place. how does that conversation look like to kind of, I don't want to say like backtrack, but how do you kind of get them back to the exclusive representation?
So it's really just the first meeting is, I look at it as that's our meeting that I would normally do in the office, but we're at a house because that's how the connection happens. So how am I building value? I normally bring the buyer packet to that meeting. I ask them, do you have an hour, when this house may only take 10, 15 minutes to view. And then, we'll talk over some of the things we need to look at. I don't normally do it in the house, we'll pop over to a coffee shop or we'll briefly talk in the yard, just kind of depending on how warm they are or not. But really it's just getting them into the office, getting them on a call, getting them to a point, and it's really creating doubt that they know what they're doing. They don't know how to get financing. They don't know what to look for in houses. When Matt Morrow talks about inspections and looking at houses and how do you show all the things that you do and you advocate for them on, how do you create that value? So for me, that's the best way to get them warmed up to like committing to work with me, is creating enough doubt that they don't know what they're doing, because they don't a lot of the times.
So you just mentioned how you might be at a house and keep on the connection sort of determines how the conversation goes. Well, what if it's, some rando from the other and there's really not a connection. Like they're there to see that house and they probably don't really care who you are, what your name is, and what you have to say. So are those just kind of not wasting my time showing this house, or like how do you work that lead that's not super connected, can be cold? How do you make them warmer and then move them into that conversation, which is, I'm going to guess, probably not happening at that point.
Correct. Yeah.
Kelsey, will you kind of summarize the question for our friends that are online?
Oh yeah. Like if you get an online lead or an internet lead, even like a listing call and someone's not necessarily wanting to work with you, not very warm, not very open, how do you continue that conversation? And are you having that conversation with them about agency? No, if they're like dead in the water, I'm not going to be like, oh, you have to sign this. I've had people talk about buyer's agency where they say, yeah, I just print it and I bring it to the first house and I make them sign it before I open the door. Like that would never work, in my opinion, or they're not going to trust you, like anywhere you go. I think of like a lot of other industries where, you have a meeting and then you immediately get a contract right after. And that's very standard. Like if you meet with a financial advisor and you say, yeah, this sounds great, I want to work with you, they're going to send you a contract. So I think we're just making it too complicated. Like when I bring this up, it's very like, this is the standard process. We've gone over this, and I start the meeting with, and I'll get back to your question. I know I'm not answering that, but I start the meeting with, this is for us to decide if we're a good fit. And like from the very beginning, I'm not committing to you either at this point. And I think that kind of flips their head to like, wow, do I want to work with this person versus, well, I want to not have to pay this person, So at the end, it's the same as any other professional meeting. If you meet with financial advisors, the best example I can think of, and you commit to work with them, they're going to send you, your policy and you're going to sign it. And then you're committed to working with them unless you cancel the relationship. So it's just a natural progression of, here's everything we're going to teach you. We will have an agency agreement to sign off at the end if we agree to work together. I go over for sell by owners next gen's situation where our commission wouldn't be paid on the buyer side, and then that would be your responsibility. We go through the buyer broker fee and the fee sheet of what that covers to really build value of like, here's all the things you don't want to have to worry about that we're covering. And then at the end, it's really seamless. You get this email, you need to sign the agency agreement, you have the buyer packet if you want it, and then we'll get you set up with. Half the time they're not even approved. So we'll send you a lender recommendation list. We'll get you set up on a search. I do like doing searches right away. So even if they're not pre-approved, but they have like a criteria in mind, I'll tell them we'll set it up for this, because that's kind of my gauge of where you'd be at for the payment you want. But we need that full pre-approval before we can see anything, and we need to update your criteria. But that keeps them from like falling off into limbo, because they're excited about these houses. They want to see these houses, so then they want to get pre-approved. But Heather, back to your question, that's probably 15-20% of my business and not something I work super strongly. So I don't have a good, I don't have a good answer to that. Like if they're not super warm, it's normally just, it's following up, phone calls. What are you looking for? What do you need? A lot of times they need pre-approved and we just can't get, like, in my personal opinion, you can't get past that block of the person that's not going to get pre-approved. And they just want to look at houses on the internet all the time, which to me, I mean, we're all busy enough with people that are qualified and ready to go. So I don't push that until they are pre-approved and they are, really ready to go on things.
But one of the things in that light of that is that keep in mind that we have to make the decision on working with a buyer the same way we do with the seller. If you go to a seller's house and they're like, hey, just give me the price. I mean, what can you sell it for? I'm kind of looking at it that way. And how much is your commission? Would you take less? And so all this kind of negative, you start going, I'm not sure this is going to be any good. I'm not sure I want to work with this listing. It's exactly the same thing with the buyer. If you, like Kelsey said, you start talking and you're like, hey, you've got a minute, we go sit down and talk, run back to the office and go through the presentation of how that's going to work. And if they're like, yeah, I ain't got time for that, then it's like over.
And I think that's the thing too of like, there are a couple agents and I can get better at this because I am pretty like business and here's my system and here's my process. But like there are a couple agents that I love because they are super good at, I just met this person. Yeah, let's go to the coffee shop. Like, let's talk about your goals. Let's, and I think it's just what your personality is. Like, I am definitely way more of someone that's like, let's build some rapport. Let's talk about your goals. And then I feel good getting this signed. But like at the end of the day, you have to know how you would use it too. Because I could probably get someone to sign it with the really business, like I need this signed to feel like I'm protected. But if they go and buy another house with another agent, even though legally they owe me money, I'm not gonna sue them. Like I'm never gonna do that because my reputation is way more important than that one buyer. So although, the agency agreement is more of a loyalty agreement in my mind, the exclusive, like you would get paid in that situation if you're doing, your due diligence and your duties in it. But it's more of with those cold people, like how do I warm it up? How do I want them to talk to me about their stuff? Because if they don't, then you're kind of playing the same game as with just appointed agency where it's like, they're going to go buy it with whoever opens the door first, regardless.
What kind of time period you put on this? I don't want to talk it.
I do a year.
Will you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's time frame of the agreement. How far do you go?
I do a year for everyone.
How do you handle that if they say I don't want to lock in that?
I've never had anyone say anything about it. And even if they're like, I'm pre-approved now, my pre-approval is only good for 4 months and my lease ends in the end of July. I mean, it's still a year because like, what if you go month to month? What if you sign a new lease? And no one's ever scoffed at that. And I think it's just like that they want to work with me. I want to work with them and they're happy about it. If someone wanted to do less, we all kind of, it's situation dependent, does that make sense for you and then how you're going to put in and yeah.
I was gonna say earlier with like fires and wanting to show up on those cold leads last time. I just put that on that. Quick, I've done this. Like you've done this more than 10 times and it's not working. You need to change it up. So like give me 15 minutes. We'll go through this consultation and he gives exactly working for you. Or if not, you can just play this little game and put it in. It's good to hear now. So I was missile guy. This is that. Represents the fire and just walk through. Made it sound like the agency agreement too. There's like a agency agreement either.
Agency agreement does not have. It is a disclosure. This exclusive buyer's representation is actually an agreement, a contract between both of you. So it's as valid as a listing contract. Can you get out of it? But the idea that you're making promises to each other. I'm going to do this stuff. You're going to do that stuff. It's a commitment to one another. And so in most cases, people are like, yeah, that's my girl.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to work with
Yeah.
her until she isn't. And then you're going to go, you're not my girl anymore.
And I've let someone out of it once. Like they looked at one house with me. They looked at a house with a friend. They were like, we want to buy it. It's like I showed them one house and then they found what they wanted. And it's a reputation thing. Like I don't want to lose all those potential future referrals and, future business because their friend was selling something. So I, did a flat fee to do the paperwork, still got paid a fair amount, I think, for doing one showing and that consult and everything, but it's also the repeat business and the reward that comes from that is great.
I'm just, do you do the same amount, like for every, like, just like your business practice, the same amount each time, or do you fluctuate that, like, based on your buyer?
I do the same, but there are some people where I'm like, God, I wish I would have charged more for this. So, and that's something where I've always done the same. And we're creatures of habit. Like before I did this, I was like shaking. Like I was like, okay, here's the agency agreement, and now it's like, no, you're not getting a search until you sign it because like everyone else does and it's not a big deal. But that's something that like I'm kind of internally looking at. I haven't checked the legality of that, but there are people where from appointment one, you're like, this is going to be rough, but like, I want to help you. And like the empathy side of me takes over and I'm like, oh, so I probably should charge more on those people. But yeah, it's the same across the board.
You're gonna be real careful with like changing your, it's like, what are you basing that on?
Mhm.
Well, I just like them a lot better. Like, hey, because when we make a promise of service, that's not a variable. That's it.
Right.
This is what we do. If you're an asshole, we still do that. We have to. It's the same thing in listing. You get a listing and they're just terrible to work with. You can't stop servicing them. You've made an agreement. And so you just have to bite your tongue and, live through it. So.
Well, and I don't know if there would be like an ethics, something like that. If it was like, if it's under a certain price point, I charge more, you know what I mean?
Good.
So seller agrees to pay the 3%. You're not a total this
No.
obviously. So
No.
I'm just kind of curious in your district how often.
I
Can
have
you repeat what he said?
he's asking how often you have to use it. Like how often is someone not paying, if yours is 3% in that contract, how often is someone not paying 3%? So it's normally with for sale by owners. I've had one time where the listing, selling side commission was lower. And that's a really easy conversation. Before I even show it, I just say, hey, here's our showings, just, this one has a, 2%. So this additional would be covered by you guys on the settlement statement. And that's a really easy conversation. That would be additional cash to close for you unless it can be brought to the loan. And yeah, just let them know before they see it. And honestly, sometimes people choose not to buy house A because they like A and B equally and they don't want to pay the extra. And then with for sale by owners, I always talk to the for sale by owner first, do like the unrepresented seller fee so they can pay us. And you let the buyers know that if you see a for sale by owner, I tell them I work with a lot of for sale by owners. Normally there's not an issue. Normally they're fine with paying my side. They just don't want to pay the listing side and make it, very, I think everyone like villainizes for sale by owners, but I'm just like, maybe they work from home. Maybe they have no issue doing that side of the transaction, but I want to make sure that they're working with a reputable attorney that knows how to do real estate law. And like, again, that doubt that they don't know what they're doing. So you really want me in this. So let me know first. I'll talk to them. If they're not willing to cover what we've agreed upon, again, that goes on the settlement statement.
So there's, go ahead.
If you get, so I got for sub owner, you get 3% fee for the charge for. So would you schedule for 4 or would you say 3,000?
I would just ask for what the like amount is in the, so I do 3 in the exclusive.
Yep.
So I would ask, and honestly, I ask for sell by owners for 3.5 as a negotiation tactic because then they normally want to get something back and they agree to 3. Yeah.
And then for sell by owners, sometimes you can maybe get 4 because you're going to offer them a separate services. I'm going to help process the paperwork and we'll get there. Be careful of saying, I'll do it for 4 and the 3 is the buyers and you're doing it for 1. When you agree to that and then you go into a dual agency situation, you have increased your liability not by twice as much, by 3 times. Because the dual agency is fraught with more liability. You have responsibilities to both sides, you have interaction with both sides, you can't favor one side or the other, you know, that kind of stuff. So be careful with that if you're talking about, well, I could represent you in the transaction too and get another %. It may not be worth it, okay? So just that, Brian, you want to do something?
Oh, okay. Just question.
Yeah, if you
So in the last month, I've been in homes where my clients have bought them and I look at the like, I have one and a half.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of buyers right now, I'm sure everybody knows. And just at like 2 o'clock today, my appointment, they're so better, they want 2%. So my frustration is, you know, like, not this lot, all we all have different buyers. We're to implement, like, hey guys, we've been working for 4 months now here, let's find this more. I think that's kind of like where I'm like, okay, I just have to have this conversation. I'm like, hey, just so you know, I put my foot down after I think we all know software and happen. Hey, how do we implement this with?
tell them that. Tell them that.
So
Just tell them and say, listen, yeah, here's what I get paid. And I've had 2 that you know came up short, and so all of a sudden I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense. I do all this and I'm not being paid. Because of that, I'm implementing this into my service. And what a great way to sort through your buyers. You know, because you got 10, 12 buyers. Really, how many you're going to buy? How many are serious? So I want to take a sec because to make sure. Thanks. Go ahead.
I guess a question on that, because I've never had that where like I've acted, it's like I've shown like one house, they were cold, we warmed up, whatever. But I wonder like legality of, you know, can you tell them this is, you know, the standard that I charge and they're not paying it. So we would have, you know, this exclusive signed and, you know, this would be the difference if you wanted to buy this house. I don't know the legality of that, if you can get it signed out.
Yeah, after the fact of like seeing the property, that kind of stuff, you kind of stop.
And you also say, hey, I was in this training class today, it was recommended
Absolutely.
that I adopt this
Sure.
policy. Here you go.
Sure. Yeah,
Well, and if
absolutely.
you had it, I think if you have it before you show it to them, even if they've seen other stuff with you, you'd still be, I mean, it's probably going to be kind of an awkward conversation, but just, you know, yeah. And another thing that I do, like if someone that, Heather, I think this would be a better answer for your question on someone that's super cold, and then maybe you showed them one house. I know a lot of people, like as much as we follow up, they just don't answer or they fall off. And then, hey, they want to see something else 2 months later. Let's say that, you know, you have the conversation then, yeah, that's wonderful. You know, we just do need this signed off before we show you any other houses. And then sometimes it's, hey, I need to see this house really quick. And they're going to put an offer in and you just say, you know, if we're going to be representing you, this is our policy, explain it. And sometimes like an offer is the best, you know, way, even before you show it to them. But like if you were to write an offer, you know, I need to know if you're committed to me. I need to know where you stand on this before I even show it to you. And sometimes those people that like are going to just kind of run you around every couple months, if they're not going to sign it, even if you built all your value, it's just like,
I want to go here because I know there's a few people in the room who have implemented this process. Cam, I know you're one. I want to just hear a little bit from you about how's it going, your implementation, what's going on from there. So if you like stand up and address that.
Okay.
Or would you
Campos.
mind actually coming to the front? That would,
Oh, sure, yeah.
that'd be
come on.
helpful.
Come on.
Not to put you on the spot or anything,
Great.
but thanks.
Yeah. Not that you're in front of everybody.
That's fine. I can talk.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Cameron Campos, if you don't know me. But yeah, so I started doing this probably into last year, into the beginning of this year, because similar to Mariah and certain things that you're seeing, like I'm seeing this come up more and more and more where the buyer's agent compensation is just not there. And especially like we've been pretty like shielded from it here in the Midwest. But if you pay attention to what's going on around you, not looking great. I was talking to you the other day about just up north of us, up in Minnesota, the 0% are coming pretty strong with a buyer's agent. And so I'm like, we got to do something about that. So yes, I've been doing exclusive buyer's agency. It's really, I haven't had any objections to it. You just set expectations. So to kind of circle back on the cold leads thing, and how I do that. So one, like, I don't show anybody a house until we've had a consultation first. And I know that some people will do the one-offs. Like, it's not going to happen with me, because I've been doing this for 6.5 years and I've wasted too much of my time. Just being honest with you, jumping on cold stuff, throwing spaghetti at a wall, hoping something will stick, and it's just not worth the time. So like, honestly, like, if the client's not willing to sit down and have a conversation with you, fine, good luck. They'll go find another Pop-Tart agent that will open the door for them. No offense, sorry, but like, I'm just not going to do that anymore. Like, I've been burned so many times in the past, and like you said, half the time they can't get qualified anyway. So what's your time worth? Like,
And I think that, I mean, I'll add to that. I think that comes with time in the business. Like, I've been in 5.5, you've been in 6.5, you said.
Yep.
And so like, my first 2 months in the business, I was very happy to show those people, because you're learning and you're growing your skills, and you know, those people can sometimes be your best future. Like, some of those are my best referral people now, because like, you had the time, even though they were hesitant. So I agree with you. I'm the same way now, unless it's like a listing call, because I think that is, you know, duty to my seller. But yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to where you're at in your business, and what, you know, if you're frustrated by not getting paid what you want to get paid, then like, do this first or don't work with them.
But for me, I guess a priority for me too is safety. So like, that's something with, especially the cold leads, like that's something that did get brought up. But if these listings have these listing safety pledges signed and on their listing, you can't go into that house without previously identifying that buyer. So like, you need to, that's the importance of getting them sat down. And if you tell a cold lead that, hey, you know what, our company has a policy, a safety policy, we haven't met, we need to meet in person, I need to get a copy of your driver's license ID. If they argue on that, you just tell them, okay, well, can you go test drive a car without giving them a copy of your driver's license? No. Okay, that makes sense. More than likely they'll meet you, and if they won't, it's not. Okay.
They're not looking
it's not worth your
to
time.
anyone
No.
if they're not going to meet you.
But for me, like, from a safety aspect, like, if I go show a $300,000 house, I'm gonna make, you know what, maybe 10 grand. Is that worth my life? No. Like, it's not. I mean,
Someone's over there like,
whatever. I'm not a mathlete, but like,
well,
it's just not for me. Like, and everyone's got to make that decision for themselves. But I've got a wife, I've got 2 little kids, and like, we've heard the stories, and we've seen the stuff that's happened to agents, and it's just not worth it for a sale.
Yeah.
Like, you can wake up the next day, go make another sale, and be fine. So like, why put yourself on the line for that? It's not worth it.
I think another thing that I would mention with people that push back, I think a lot of people are worried about someone pushing back, and it truly depends on the client, their mindset, because sometimes it's people that just, in my opinion, are never going to commit to anyone, and they want the first person that's going to open the door, and then I'm not the person for them, right? Or the flip of that are the people that are like, I mean, what if you show me one house and I buy it and I don't think you're worth 3%, you know? That's where I bring up the, you know, I've had someone ask me that, and it's actually funny. He is a financial advisor and a very good friend of mine. And I was like, you have to look at the people that care about the numbers and look at it as an investment. It's like, there's 3% that may or may not come out of your pocket, depending on what can be done with the loan, versus if I'm doing, you know, if you're signed on to work with me, I'm yours. I'm working hard for you every single day. I don't work with a lot of buyers. And then you tell them, okay, you know, if you're respecting me and being loyal to me, then I, you know, want to prospect for sell by owners, potential expires. I want to find you pocket listings. You know, I want to do all these things. And what is your money worth? Because this 3%, maybe you don't have to do an appraisal gap because there aren't multiple offers. Maybe you don't have to go 20 grand over list price. Maybe you don't have to do XYZ. So like, what does your equity and your overall picture look like at the end of the day if you just, you know, agree that we're going to be in a service agreement together?
But one of the things too is I want you all, as you start to implement this, because it's fairly easy to explain what we do to find your home. you know, that kind of stuff in the negotiation. All of you need to think, what do I do after the signature? Because it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. There's all these things that you need to do to process through. What if the appraisal comes in low? How do you, I mean, you don't just tell the listing agent, well, I don't know what you're gonna do. No, you get in the mix and you start helping it, figuring out how's this gonna go? Do they really want to buy it for that? Can you do something about it? So after the signature, there's as much work as there is getting to the signature, okay? So think about that. This is what I do after you sign paperwork and you're home celebrating. And I'm not celebrating because I know what's left.
And that's where like building, like a lot of people I'm sure have like a timeline or something if they go over things with buyers of like what happens at every stage. And I'm always thinking in a buyer meeting, like, how do I give them scenarios that, you know, I'm problem solving every step of the way for them. Like this might come up, here's how we solve it. This might come up, here's why you need me. This might, and I'm not saying here's why you need me, but it's like all this stuff is gonna come up and that uncertainty, that doubt is like really us easing that and making it streamlined and simple and solving problems for them. Like they want to sign it because they're like, I don't want to worry about any of that.
Especially millennials.
Yes, they need info.
So millennials, well, and that's the tough part about why explaining this all up front is so beneficial to millennials, because millennials want the help, as you said, and they will pay for it.
Yep, they do, they will. One quick thing, Mike, is there anything you're doing different? Like I know you.
Come on up, Mike.
This as well. This is another guy who's implemented the process
So,
and can answer the questions. I'll get right back.
great. So, same thing. I've been implementing this all the time. I'm in the same boat as Cameron where I'm not meeting anybody at a house to start, period. Maybe if it's a direct referral directly from a close friend, it's their family member, maybe I'll go right to the house if I know it's going to be a great possibility. But I have a small little listing on 10th Street, well, should sell it, and I have had 80 messages about it. Can I see this house? Can I see this house? Can I see this house? What kind of time am I wasting if I do that? And I've gotten 2 buyer consultations out of it. One person had $500 saved up in a 480 credit score. Well, that would have been a great showing.
So you're first, that's what I can.
Right. And I will now. But so that's the thing, starting that first upfront presentation gets you in the door to ask something. And it allows you to present, hey, this is what I'm worth. This is what we're going to do. This is what this whole process looks like. I'm here with you. And this is how I get paid. So I'll give 2 examples. Have a buyer right now, had this conversation with them. Hey, this is how I get paid. This is what I'm going to do. I've been talking with you for a year about getting your credit ready. Look, 3% is my fee. Now, the nice thing is that the seller is going to pay for that most of the time, but there are times where they're not, right? So isn't it cool that you don't have to pay most of my commission? Yes, you agree? Awesome. Now, when you call me in 4 years to sell your house, isn't it cool that you get to pay the commission for Joe Schmo agent? No, that's not cool. Right. So that's how the seller feels. So we're going to do it this way. And I will let you know right away. And she actually messaged me and said, hey, can we see this house? Also, are they covering all your commission or do I have to bring something in front? The buyers started.
Heather's got a question. We're all free.
It is for all 3.
Hell no.
Do you wish the buyer broker fee was also on the exclusive broker?
It is going to be put there.
Thank God.
The problem is,
I have them sign both though, so it's on the appointed, and honestly,
right, you should do both.
Yeah.
What do you charge for buyer book?
I'm not telling.
It's only an hour class.
So I personally, and tell me if this is not allowed, but I personally download them together. So it's the exclusive and the agency, and I just call it exclusive agency agreement, because I think when you send, that's legal?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I figured, but I never actually asked.
It's actually, it is required, if you go by the letter of the law, it's required to give disclosure, which is agency prior to agreement on exclusive.
Yeah, so, and that was my thought process, is the only time I had pushback is if I sent them as two separate documents, honestly, because people would be like, okay,
Which
here's
one?
agency, and then like, why is this one different, and this one I have to pay, but can I agree to just that one? So like, as simple as just downloading them all as one and being like, here's the agency agreement, please sign off before we go see a house. Then they're not delineating like, well, this one I don't have to pay with, so I only want to sign that one, you know?
So when you say downloading this one, do you mean just sending both together in one?
No, I downloaded them as one doc, filled out the text boxes, and sent it over as one. Just made a new template.
I think if you have the two documents, you open them, whatever, and then you save and share, I think you just send one email with both documents.
One email, but they'll still be labeled different. I'm almost positive. So when they like go
Oh,
through to sign, it says a different name at the top. So I just think a lot about like what's the user experience, and I think people are like, well, I don't want to sign this one, or what's the difference? And then they like, we go through everything in it and what it is, but they read into it more when there's two, I feel like.
Change the listing record. You can close that so that the sell agent knows what. Is that gonna be?
Well, ours does.
Can
Yeah,
you
ours is
repeat,
so-
can you repeat that for online?
But it doesn't tell you that. So,
Yeah, it does.
New ones
It
do.
says,
Yeah.
there's like 6%, 3% of the buying. So that's on our listing agreement. I would guess that not long in the future, it will be across the board.
Will that be put on the MLS?
Yeah, the MLS does post what the offer is to a buying agent.
And I always download those and put them in every loop because I've never had it happen to me, but I've had people say that it got changed. Like it
Yeah,
was
right.
3% when you
Yeah.
put the offer in, and then it's 2.5.
Yes.
So, Stacia online is asking, can we
Oh.
discuss more details on how this is paid on the CD, success in getting worked into the loan, especially for buyers who are low on cash?
Yes. Go ahead.
It's,
I know we talked.
yeah, it comes through as a closing cost. So I had this, on a for sale by owner was paying 1.5%. And my clients had to pay 1.5% upfront. It was a closing cost.
And it just, I mean, I would say talk to the lender on that because everyone's like, it's specific on, you know, what type of loan is it? What percentage of concessions can they get? What other grants are they using? So like, as long as there should be a way to get something covered, but like, where else are they using
Yeah.
closing costs?
Mostly right now, because of lending rules, mostly what we do is we put it in there and try to get, number one, try to get the seller to pay that as a cost. We need to refer to it, according to people I've talked to, we need to refer to it as a buyer acquisition fee, so that it's in there as that, so that there's confusion sometimes when they say, wait, the listing is paying this much. And so you can't come on and say, well, no, they're going to pay this much. And it's like, okay, it's a buyer's acquisition fee. It is paid directly to the buyer broker by the seller. Okay, so it works the same as closing costs. And so, yes, I'm going to get to that in my promise. So, you know, that's how it works. Because of the lending rules, it gets weird. I mean, when you're talking to somebody, you're like, so are you going to need closing costs? We have that set. No, we got that covered. Okay, let's do this. Let's go in and get closing costs for this much. And then it comes out as buyer's acquisition fee to this company. So there's numerous ways to do it. Number one, try to get the seller to cover it because that's easy.
Well, and I think too, like, because instead of it being like, can it be covered on the like settlement statement or part of the mortgage or not, I just put it back on the buyers and say, I'm happy to talk to your lender on that and like make it easy for them. Talk to the lender on their behalf, get the numbers. Don't, because like the minute that you're like, talk to your lender and tell them all this stuff, they're like, I don't want to do that. I don't know what that means. But it put it back on them, and it's like, it depends on how you utilize, you know, the 3 or 6% or whatever you can use on concessions, whether that's closing costs you're getting or, you know, an acquisition fee for the buyer getting covered, because either way, they're getting money covered,
Right.
whether it's your commission or closing costs or whatever.
Yes, sir.
If that were to get messed up, would there, I mean, how illegal would it be if you were to say, okay, we agreed on this number with you paying, I know you originally wanted to pay 1.5%, we agreed upon this number. Is there any way to go back and like amend the listing agreement?
No, that's illegal.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, that's where the issue comes up, because everyone thinks, well, we can't say commission, or we can't do that on a purchase agreement. What is happening is you have a contract, quote, purchase agreement, and if you reference a change on the contract, quote, listing agreement, that is completely illegal. You cannot use one contract to amend another. But if you're on the purchase agreement and you're using that contract to say, you, seller, are paying us, buyer's broker, directly this amount. That's not illegal. We're not asking the listing agent to change anything they're doing. That's why this works on next generation. Okay? Now, one of the things that you need to make yourself aware of, it's oftentimes not used. On the back page of your forms is a form that's called Buyer Acquisition Fee Addenda. This is a notice to the seller that the buyer fee is going to be in there, and you're going to expect them to pay it as part of the transaction.
So would you still use, like if I'm, prospecting for sell by owners, I would use the
Unrepresented seller, yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, you certainly can do that, yes, sir.
In theory though, if you know they're paying 2% and that's Zillow and your buyer's already signed this, could you go in and not worry about getting it signed and send over the 3% with your offer? I've done that in the past where I was like, I didn't have time to get anything signed with the offer. I was like, I want 3.5%.
No, because your inference is that you're going to change what the listing company pays you. You have to be very, very clear.
You're talking about it for sell by owner
Yeah,
though.
Oh, for sale by owner?
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, in the unrepresented seller, which you send to them, it speaks to and addresses
I always
how
send it
much
to
the
them
fee is going to
prior
be. Yes,
because
I don't show.
and it's specific to that client. So
Yes.
they're not, it's not, oh, I'm gonna sell your house for X%. It's like if I bring this couple through and they bring a reasonable offer, are you willing to pay X amount? And a lot of people are like, heck yeah. Or sometimes you'll get, I'm not gonna agree to anything, or I'm only gonna do this flat fee
I'll
because,
only do it when I see the offer.
right.
Yeah.
Which at that point, I'm like, I'm still gonna show my client the house if it's a good property for them, but they know, they're gonna potentially have to pay the difference. And then you just look at how are we building this into purchase price, maybe to have the seller cover it or whatever.
Exactly.
And it goes back to setting expectations too. So like you asked something, I can't remember who asked about like, how do you explain this to a buyer? But like, if you have this consultation with them and you explain that they're going to need these funds set aside, maybe they're not ready to go yet. Maybe they need to wait 3 or 4 or 5 months and save up some money. And I can tell you that if you explain that to them, they'll do it.
Or they'll buy a different house.
Or
I mean, I've
they'll
had people look and they're like, we really like that house, but we don't want to pay this fee. And then I've gone back to the for sale by owner and said, hey, can we build this into purchase price? They don't want to pay X out of pocket, but they want to buy this property and they have signed up to pay me a buyer broker or a buyer acquisition cost. And then sometimes like the for sale by owner will give it to you if they know that like your people are not going to want to pay that and might not look at the house if they're not going to agree to be open to it.
Good question.
Yeah, Michelle. So if I've gotten this exclusive agent to buyer agreement signed with my buyer for 3%, there are some scenarios out there, like if there might be a promotion where the seller is offering a 4% commission during the month of June to sell these homes. Or what if we run across a 7% listing? Does this limit the amount of commission that we can pay?
It doesn't, but in that scenario, disclosure would be mandatory. That you talk to the buyer and go, hey, just so you know, there's a special thing going on here. They're offering, especially if it's called a bonus. Bonuses have to be disclosed. Changes in commission paid don't. But in that scenario, because you have an agreement for what amount, then you say, maybe it's like, hey, they're talking 4%, got a deal going. I'll tell you what, let's split it. This will be cool. So just disclose it, make sure they understand what's going on, and you'll be fine.
What about on the 7% listing though?
Same thing.
Just do the same.
Yeah, same thing, because they're paying 3.5, your buyers have agreed to this level. So you need to just make sure they know you're getting paid a little extra. Yes, ma'am.
Kelsey, you will not go after somebody who broke their word and they bought a house with another agent. But this question is actually for all three of you, because I think you can all empathize with that situation. Nobody wants the reputation to go better with that. So you're selling something that's 2%, you want 3% on your exclusive representation. Do you 100% of the time follow through and have a buyer pay?
Once you set the expectations, yeah, I think I should say if you've added enough value in that conversation.
No, I'm asking what you do.
Oh, well, that's what I'm saying. So like, if we were able to add seller value in that conversation, they understand it is what it is. Like, and they're okay with it. But like, we have to understand as agents what we actually do.
But I think part of the question is, the seller's paying 2, that's it. You still require the
The
buyer
extra
to pay the extra
1%? 100%. Yeah, they've agreed to it.
That's
Because that
correct.
conversation was had up front.
Because I'm thinking,
I have done it every time but once, and it was because that would be the reason they weren't able to get the house. So in that case, it's like, and I just say no anonymous giving. It's like, hey, we agreed to this and you need X to happen to get this house. I do not want that to happen to you, but please like think of me when your friends and family want a realtor, you know, and just, I mean.
the reason I ask is that I think it's great in theory, but if no one is actually following.
Implementing it, yeah.
It sucks for the rest of us
Yeah,
that
no, there's
have to follow.
a lot of follow through on it.
Well, and I think we just look at, like Cameron said, the rest of the country in a lot of areas, like it's pretty standard. So I'd rather have an awkward conversation and lose a buyer on one, but like be ready for it when these are required, or like no one's gonna get paid, you know?
Bill?
I think part of the problem is that we talk about commission as though it's something dirty.
Right.
And I think you need to be upfront and maybe every listing that they want to see, you state to them, well, on this one, the seller is going to pay my costs.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I just say that I never
And
like,
if not,
yeah.
it's part of their offer is to pay their time.
and then I just let them know if they're not. You know, I said it's great if I don't let you know any different. The seller's not going to cover that. If not, I will let you know. But yeah, I think it's coming and it needs to happen.
Yeah, it's a commitment you make to them. It's like, you will make sure that it's like, hey, just so you know, I want to show you a house. Let's go see what we can do. But right now, they're offering 2 instead of 3. And so we would have to work with that somehow.
And I think the
So-
whole like getting paid on what we do, like realtors, I feel like it's a bad thing to think we should get paid, right? And so I'll talk to buyers and I'll be like, you know, you get paid every 2 weeks for your job, I'd assume. Like I want to get paid for the work I do. I do not commit to many buyers at once. And it's like, I'm committing to you. I want to get paid just like you get paid, and that's only if they have questions or like scoff at it, you know, but it rarely happens.
Listen, right now, we are 15 minutes over. I don't mind staying. But if you have things going and stuff, I absolutely understand, and, you know, if you need to go, you need to go. So to the extent that anybody has more questions or wants to learn more, you know, feel free to get in. Yes, sir.
Is there a difference on VA? Because my understanding was you can't put, if the buyer has to pay part of the commission, you can't put that on the closing disclosure.
Well, if the buyer is actually paying it, usually you can't put buyer acquisition fee on a closing disclosure. It would be a rare scenario that a lender right now will allow that. They're going to allow closing costs or fees, or the seller is going to raise the value of the property. I mean, it's the point where I talked with one person and they came in and said, you know, listen, you know, here's what we're going to do. You got an agreement. Everything's looking good. And the buyer's agent actually went back to the seller's agent and seller and said, listen, the buyers are paying the fee. What they want to do is raise the price by that much. It's not going to cost you anything. We're not, you know, none of that's going to cost you anything. We just need to be able to finance it. And sellers be like, gosh, you know. Okay. Yep.
I just looked at it as, this goal, they actually put that in there, the pages, they look above what you're paying. I mean, they get it.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, no.
My question kind of was too, though, what if you get, like, you said you got to the end, and it's making a difference whether they got that, the house or not?
Yeah.
What if you get to the end and like the buyer just doesn't have the funds?
That's what it was. I mean, they weren't able to, and it was like, I did 2.5, like to make up the difference for them to get the house. And like, at the end of the day, we all like to sit here and talk like we are just like headstrong and we're going to get what we're worth. And it's like, if your buyer can't afford to get the house that they want because it was top of their budget, you know, their dream house, they were veterans. It's like, we're all going to do the right thing, I would think, in that situation. And to me, that's the right thing.
And what we're talking about for those of you online is what happens if the buyers just can't buy the house if that's true. Let's not forget this one thing. We are all able to put a promissory note together over a period of time. Maybe it's like, you know what? Hey, pay me in a year. I'm going to give you an interest-free promissory note. I've done it, Heather. I've done it.
And it's worked.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said, no, I know you don't have it now. I'm on your side. I understand.
See, and I would
So-
rather just get the 2.5 at closing than deal with that.
It could be, yes, but I'm saying if you get to a point where it's 1.5, they can, yeah, you know, so, but that still is an option. You can say, listen, I know you don't got it. I understand you don't
I
have it.
know you don't got
And
it.
did
You don't got it. So, I'm sorry?
Altoon's coming out.
Oh, wait, so.
Oh, yeah, I got it. Yeah. I got it. Okay. How are we doing? Are we getting to a point where people are understanding, got your questions answered, all that kind of stuff? Guys, thank these three.
Yeah, absolutely.
Learning and stuff. And if everybody would, hey, I want to tell you something really quick. If everybody would, this lady right here puts all of this together and makes this all happen. She needs a round of applause. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, man.